Hello everyone. This tutorial is going to go over our World Cup tracing exercise very quickly. So I have Illustrator open and I have imported our the World Cup tracing background graphic already, and it's on layer 1. This artboard size here is 1920 by 1080 like we've been using. I'm going to turn on the rulers with Command R, all right, just so I have those so I can create some guides or whatever if I want. I'm going to select the image here, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and fill the page with the colored area, or the artboard with the colored area, so something like that. That's probably pretty good like that, all right? Then I'm going to lock the layer, right, so it doesn't move, okay? So I'll zoom in here, and what we can do is just trace the circle using the ellipse tool, and we can hold the Option key to start from the center. So before we do that, we need to create a new layer that we can draw on, and we'll just go ahead and keep it named layer 2 for now. So the ellipse to L is the shortcut, and somewhere in here I'll click in the middle and drag, hold down the Option key, right, and also then the Shift key, and now I can get an approximation of that white circle, right? The white circle here, because it picked up my color settings that I already had here with the white fill, it's not what I want. I just want an empty circle. So let's change that so that we have over here we'll have no fill, and let's give it a stroke. In this case, that white background is, so the white circle is white, but let's make it some other color for now, just so we can see, all right? And so I'll just make it, I don't know, let's just make it this blue color, because that doesn't seem to be anywhere. And let's adjust the stroke so that it's about as thick as that white area, okay? So let's see, let's try 8 point to see if that looks about right. That might be close. All right, so we'll see. Let's move this into place and see how close we can get with 8 points. Maybe 9 points would be better. Let's try 9, and let's use the arrow keys. While I've got the black arrow active, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard just to nudge this, like a couple pixels at a time. Maybe let's try one more. Let's try 10 points. Yeah, that might be about right. Okay, and what we can do also is I'm going to turn on my transparency palette here, and while that's selected, I'm going to, instead of having this normal transparency, I'm going to make it a difference layer. It uses I guess a hue difference. I think it is. I'm not sure exactly, but some difference in the in the colors between what this is and what's behind it to indicate sort of the contrast between the two things. And we're pretty close here, so I think there's maybe a little bit of a distortion from the photo of the background image, so I think that this is probably close enough. And right, so if I select this and when I move this off, you can see how the difference effect works. All right, so we can see what's behind the drawn object that has the difference effect on it. Now, in order to turn this into sort of like an actual object with thickness that we can manipulate, I'm on step 5 here in my instructions. I'm going to outline the stroke. So here I'll go up to Object, and then Path, and Outline Stroke. I'm going to turn off the background. It's essentially turned the stroke into a fill. That's what it's done. So the blue area is now, you can see, is the fill, whereas it used to be a 10-point stroke. Now this object has a blue fill with no stroke. So it's basically a donut now instead of a thick line. Okay, so now I have that donut, and I'm going to break it up into those segments by using some lines first to find the one edge, and then I'm going to find all the other edges, the ends of those white segments. I'll hit / key to get my line segment tool, and what I'm going to do is hover over near the middle of the circle, center of the circle, and you see it finds the center. Illustrator finds the circle and tells me there's the center, so I can snap to that. So I'm going to click and drag and pull it out to this one here, a line segment, okay? And it doesn't have any fill or stroke. It's a dimensionless object, so let's give it a stroke with some weight here just so we can see it, all right? Okay, and it picked up that same blue color that we had before. I'm also going to give this the difference effect on it so I can see behind it. And I'm going to switch to my black arrow. Okay, now I have that selected. So this line segment goes from the center of the circle and sort of arbitrary point out here, but it goes through that edge of the white segment. Now what I'm going to do is use a numerical method to make the copy this line segment all the way around the circle a bunch of times. And the way you do that is you use the rotate tool, R, okay? And here's the rotate tool on the toolbar. And now I'm going to hold down the Option key. And I'm going to click the center of the circle there, because that'll be the rotation point. That'll tell Illustrator that's where I want to put the rotation point when I Option click that. Option click. It brings up this dialog box. And so I'm going to do this numerically. So I'm going to show you something, how to do a little bit more math in Illustrator. So I'm going to say the angle that I want to rotate this, and I'm going to copy it so I can align it with this other segment there, is going to be, I'll say, the full circle, 360 degrees, but divided by a certain amount. Let's guess. Let's say if I want to move this line segment to here, or say copy it, I'm going to say to there, or by rotating it around the center of the circle, I'm going to guess. I'm going to say how many divisions of 360 degrees. I'm going to say how about 50 divisions, just to see what it does. And let's hit the copy. Actually, the preview is on, so if I hit tab, it'll give me a preview. Yeah, that's close. I got close. Actually, it is, I'm going to cancel this. I happen to know, because I've done this already, but I happen to know that if we do the math, so Option click again with the rotate tool on the center there. I happen to know, because I figured this out, I'll let you guys know. If you say 360 divided by 60, all right, that happens to be that gap right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the copy button here in this dialog, and there. So if I zoom in on that, you see that it aligns to the beginning, so the end of one white segment and basically the beginning of the other. We're off a little bit, but I think that might be because of the distortion of when this the photo of the background image was taken. So without doing anything else, all right. So I don't draw anything else. I don't select anything else. What I'm going to do is just hit Command D. I'm sorry. I'm going to select that. The white black arrow, and I'm going to hit Command D. And you see what it does? Command D tells Illustrator, do the same thing, that same transformation, which in this case was rotate around the specific point we picked a certain amount. Do it to the object that you have selected. And so I'm just hitting Command D a bunch of times. And you can see that math that I worked out about the 360 divided by 60 is pretty good. I'm still hitting Command D every time. You see it's making more and more copies here. It's a little off here and a little off there, but again, I think it's because the image is just a little distorted. But you see, by the time we get back, we're really close in a lot of those places. All right. So a numerical means of doing a rotation by bringing up that dialog and doing some math in the dialog box, and then using Command D to do a bunch of copies, a bunch of repeats of the last transformation you did. What I'm going to do now, let me zoom out so those are all there, I can see that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of those objects. I have my background layer locked. Let's just turn it off really quick and see. So all of those radii, I'm going to select them all. And also I'm going to deselect the donut in the middle. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to say make guides. All right. So now these are guidelines actually. And by default, guidelines in Illustrator are locked. So you see I can select the donut there, but the guidelines are locked. And they're dimensionless. They don't have any stroke. It's just like a 1 pixel line. All right. So now what I can do is I can use those guidelines And I can draw other lines on them. I can snap to those, right? For example, if I use the line segment tool again, backslash, I can click and just kind of align to that one there, and then do the same thing here, click and drag across there, and keep doing that at these locations where the ends of those white bars are. Let's do this. I'm going to select all of those that I just made, and because for some reason my default stroke is still set at 0, so let's give it some stroke, 3 points each. Okay, and I'm going to hide the guides just so we can see what's going on, which is Command semicolon on the keyboard. All right, if you go to View, you can do that. Guides, hide guides, Command semicolon. All right, so I'm going to hide them. So here are the actual draw in Illustrator objects that I traced over those guides that I made. And what am I going to do? I'm going to select those and zoom in a little bit. I'm going to use the shape builder tool that we've already looked at in our site diagrams. Shift M, and you can see now all I have to do is click there, and well, this one I didn't manipulate or put anything on. Go back to my black arrow, and here now we've got those individual segments, and what we can do is go ahead and turn off that difference and tell it that we actually want the fill to be white, just like the real thing behind there, right? So if we turn off the background now, right, now there's these kind of circular pieces that match up with those there. So you can keep doing that with all these other segments. Let's turn off our artwork again. You can keep doing that and use the guidelines you just made and the shape builder tool to make those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those other 6 white bars. Okay. All right. So we have we've got a technique for getting our inner circle. We're going to do the same thing for the outer circle. And what I've done is I've made separated put the inner circle items on an inner circle layer, and are making a new layer here for the outer circle. That's because the guides, I think you can see, they're a little bit different. If we do the same technique, the guides are going to be a little bit different. The granularity, or the increment that we need on the outside ones is going to be smaller than the inside one. So if we can put those guides on a different layer as well. And let's make another circle. So we will snap to, see if we can get to the center of the circle. And it might be because we've already destroyed the circle by cutting it. Let's do, what we can do is do it manually. And what I'm going to do in this case is draw a circle like this and snap to the bottom there, that anchor point there. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Align tool, or Align palette, to line up this new circle with the left edge of our white bar line to put it into place. So I'm going to say Align left. All right, so those are perfectly lined up. I'm going to grab one of these handles here, this one on the left. Hold down Option and Shift. Oops. Option and Shift. There's Option and Shift. And put it about here. Try and align it to that outer circle. And again, I think there's a little bit of distortion because of the way that the image was created. That's about right. And then make that into a guide. The guides are globally off. I'll hit Command semicolon to turn it off. So you see now that bigger circle, there's one circle guide for that. I'll turn off the inner circle layer, and there we go. So now we've got a guide where we've got a center point here in the middle that where we can snap to make more guides, the radial guides. I'll hit call up the line segment tool, backslash. Same technique as before. Snap to the center, drag out to get one of those radii, and give it a stroke. Let's say about 1 point. All right. So there's the first one. We'll use the same technique again to try and line up with that other end there. R for the rotate tool, hold down Option, and click on the center. And so here, the math will do, we'll say 360 divided by, we need a bigger number because it's a smaller gap. So I'm gonna guess, and I'm gonna say about 150. Right? We did 60 before, and now this gap, or this angle that we have to do is smaller than half of that other gap on the inner circle. So double the fraction on the bottom would be, from the first time we would 120, but we need a smaller number, so we make that a little bigger. I'm going to try 150 and see how that does. 360 divided by 150. Enter. Yeah, pretty close. Let's see how it does if we hit Command D. Yeah, it's not perfect. It might actually be even half of that number to get things lining up. Okay, let's make the circle. Actually, I did not actually make the circle to cut because I immediately jumped to making a guide out of that. So L to bring up the ellipse tool. Click in the center there, where all those guides are coming together. Click and drag. Hold down the Option key so that comes from the center. Hold down the Shift key so that it is a perfect circle. And you see as I move the cursor up toward the upper right, and it pulls off. I get a pull-off guide from the top of my guide circle. And so there is my circle. Let's give it a stroke again, like we did the white one. 10 point. We're a little bit off the center, but I think that might be okay. We're doing I think that in the end, this is going to be a geometrically perfect diagram. It should be. And we do the same thing. With that selected, go up to Object, Path, Outline Stroke. Right? So instead of a thick line, it is now a donut. And for these items that are on this layer, again, let's go back to black arrow. I'm going to select all of them. And do the, under transparency, make them a difference. So I can see, again, the background image underneath. So I know where, when I start applying the shape builder tool, Shift M, I can see that, yes, I'm getting that, and getting, say, drag across there to get that one, and getting that one. So again, some of these are halfway between, so about half of what I did before might be the appropriate actual amount for these segments, right? So, or at least some of them seem that way. Okay, I'll zoom out a little bit. Let's see what we did. I just did a few of them on the left side there. And I'll turn off the background. So there's a segment, and zoom in here. And there's a piece, So we can start, coloring those differently, right? Now that we've made them, we can identify them and assign them the proper colors matching what the background is. Right, so I'm just changing these colors randomly just so you can see that we actually did cut these items, right, the shape builder tool, just to demonstrate, right? So we do have all these different pieces. Okay, so the same technique would be taken all the way around. All right, I'm going to turn off that layer. Let's make a new layer. and for tracing some of these lines. So I'll just call this connecting lines, this layer. And this is going to be pretty simple. So we can just use the pen tool, P, and I'll zoom in a little bit more here and do some click and be rough now, because we can move the points and we can adjust the anchor points however we want. Now this might be a little bit tricky here to get this big, huge radius. It's because some of the techniques, the round corner widget that we can use to do these nice corners here are, it doesn't work on parallel lines. Okay. So we might need another technique to do that. All right, so I've traced that, the endpoints of that one there. Let's get rid of the fill and instead give it a stroke here and something like that. Make it thick, just a little bit thick, just so I can see it. Okay, so in this case, what I want to do is use my white arrow and just use the round widget tool to get that radius. So that's pretty easy. For the big curve across the bottom, there are two ways to do it. This way, where I've already finished from start to end with that line, I can use the convert anchor point tool, which is Shift C. Right, you can see what the cursor turns into there, and click on that anchor point and pull off here to turn it into a Bezier curve. And I can do the same thing on this one and pull off there. And what we can do is we can use the A white arrow, and we can pull these handles to kind of get that curve. All right, so that's one technique of doing this, but it doesn't quite give us the exact semicircular curve. All right, it's an approximation, but it's not quite geometrically, nice and clean. The other way to do it is use actually a circle. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna select this. Let's change the color again, just so I can see what it is. Okay. I'll zoom in here, and right about on that anchor point here, where we want the curvature to start, I'm going to use C, my scissor tool. I'm going to break that. Click right there. So now I've got that path. Not sure why I didn't change my my color. There we go. We've got that path and this one. And I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna do this a different way. I'm gonna use an actual circle to do it. A half circle. So I'll use L and drag from here, holding down Shift. And I know that I want to go to Portugal on the side, so I kind of line up with Portugal there. So there's a perfect circle now. That should give me that curvature, and it's about like give me a nice geometry. And we'll line up this anchor point there, and I'll use the scissor tool again, C, to cut the circle there at that anchor point and there, and then just delete the top. So it might not have traced that perfectly, but it is a nice semicircle. So we get a clean, at least our version of this is going to be clean. And so if I want to change this to that color, I can select it, do the eyedropper tool, I, and select my other one, and it turns into the same stroke and color. And it's a little off, so we can move it and align these just so Whoops. It should be alignment just so. I guess what we can do is we can use the align palette and get them to be perfect. And we can join them together using a join command if we want. So the round corner widget to create this radius and to create the big radius, to get a nice semicircle, I'll use the ellipse tool to get a perfect circle. Or you can use a Bezier curve. These over here we call flags. Oops. And we can, to make the flags, there are a number of ways we can do it. We can do use the pen tool, make polylines. We could join things together. I think one of the easiest ways to do it is just to use a rectangle and add endpoints and stretch them. So I'm going to make a new layer, and we'll call this flags. Okay, and we'll zoom in on one of these, and I'm just use the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle, and then simply hit the equal key. And the equal key, what it does is it changes to the pen tool, or rather the add anchor point tool, which is a kind of a version of the pen tool. And I'm just going to click. You see how we got there's a pull-off guide that aligns to the center of the geometry there. I'm just going to click right there in the center of that side, and right there, and switch to my white arrow. Grab that point and just resize that. It's not snapping exactly where I want. I wonder if I've got a grid snap on. Let's check that. So let's see. So when we do not have snap to grid, we have snap to pixel. So if I take that off, let's see now. Yeah. So I think that snap to pixel was what was keeping things from being very precise in the geometry. And once we have this shape, we can simply change the colors of these very easily. Let's get rid of the stroke. And for example, this one wants to be that sort of orange. We can make it that kind of orange. Option drag to make another copy, and select both of them with the shift key, or you could draw a box to them and then group them, Command G. So now these are one thing, one group. Zoom out a little bit. And then what we can do is grab the group, option drag, just put one in sort of in place there, then hit Command D like we did with the radii in the other diagram. Get as many as we need. You see that the last one, or they're all a little bit off, but what we can do is just move the last one into place, zoom back out, select them all, and now use the transform palette, or sorry, the align palette, and use the distribute objects, and we can distribute the pairs. So each pair is a group, so the align palette will work on the groups, and then you can distribute them according to the centers of them. And so they've all got the equal amount of space between them. And furthermore, what we can do to get change the sizes of them. And here I'm going to go back to the transparency and again do difference, just so I can see compared to the underlay. And we can see that this one needs to be shorter. So what I can do is I can take my white arrow, draw a box around those 3 points at the very top, and then drag those into place. So now this flag is the right size. And we can make a copy of it and do that, and leave a copy that has just the stroke and no fill, so we see the background to get that blank outline as well. To rotate the text, we can go ahead, and maybe what I'll do is I'll make a new layer, also another new layer, and we'll call this text. And with those lines selected, I will option drag the little highlight selection highlight square there. I'll option drag it to the text layer, making a copy of it. We'll turn off the layer that they came from, and we have these those lines left. And what we can do is make those into a grid, because we don't really need to use them as drawing items. All right, so they're grid lines. They're locked. So to create some text that's rotated, we use the text tool, T. And I recommend when you make text in Illustrator not to just click and type some text, because that will create text that when you move the when you resize it or stretch it like this, it resizes the text, and that's not always what we want, because it's a little harder to be accurate with the size of the text when you do that. If you want a certain point size, and you resize the box, it'll suddenly resize the text in different point size. So what I do is, with the text tool, I draw a box. So what the box does, and we'll put some text. Let's do, we'll do England. So I'll just put some text in here, England. And of course, we have all sorts of control over the font and the size and such, but I'm going to go click out of that, then go back to my black arrow, select that whole box. Now see, the box is bigger than the text, and I can resize the box independently. If I double click in here, and I just add lots of text, like multi-line text, and so now it acts like a paragraph, and we have automatic line breaks. So if I change the size of the box, the text flows nicely, and it doesn't resize the size of the text itself. So let's go back to England, and if I double click, no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of InDesign. We go to, we can open up the character palette, have all sorts of control over the font and the size, the kerning, etc., etc. For this one, let's see, I'm not sure what the font would be, but let's see, maybe it's, I don't know, let's see, how about that? Let's just go with Atlas for now. And if we go up here and just compare the size, all right, looks like maybe we need to get down to something about like, maybe 8 point here, 9 point. Let's go with 8 point. Let's try 8 point and go ahead and give it maybe a little bit of kerning here. Yeah, something like that. Okay, and if once the text is sized, we can just rotate it. There are a couple of ways that we can do this. I think one way is we can take our text, and you see the center point here. If we do that and we move the text in so that we snap to the guide that we want to align it to, then we switch to the rotate tool, R. And if we zoom in here a little bit, you see the little crosshair there, that's the center, that's the rotation point that we're going to rotate around. So what we could do is, it's going to rotate right around that point. We can sort of come over here and grab that handle and snap to the guide, and then move the text into place. So we've got the angle done, and we just rotate in place. You see, it's a little bit off though, so because I guess there really isn't a snap on the end there. So that's a little bit off, and we can see that the kerning needs to be adjusted, or the font, or whatever. So I think maybe a more accurate way to do it is, let's see if we've got a example here. Maybe Argentina. Why don't we do Argentina? The way to do it a little bit more accurately is, I'm going to draw a line on the guide there. So that's that line that I drew. Give it a stroke so we can see it. Is the angle that we want to put the text on. And so what we can do now is use the text tool, T, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And so when I roll over that stroke I just made, if you can see, when I roll over it, the cursor turns into a little cursor with a little, has got a little squiggly line underneath it. That means that's the put text aligned to a path tool. So I'll click when I'm over the line, and see already the text there is aligned to that line. So here we'll do Argentina. So the text is already automatically aligned to that line, and I can just move this into place and adjust the kerning, the font size, etc., etc., etc. So that's probably the more accurate way to actually have text aligned at an angle with something, is to maybe construct a new guideline or a path that for the text to follow. All right, so then the pentagons are just, we can just use geometric primitives with the polygon tool to do those, and the rest of the paths are fairly straightforward, I think. But those are basically the techniques to get a lot of this done.